It's the Full Court Press with Eric Frandsen and Jason Walker.
Welcome back to the to the show that we're doing right now.
Following the local teams, breaking down the biggest games with in-depth analysis and team interviews.
There's going to be much higher expectations, sense of awareness of what we bring to the table.
Join the show by calling into 435-752-1069 or text 435-339-0321. It's the Full Court Press.
Throws, ends up, yes! Caught! Touchdown! They did it!
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome on in to another edition of the Full Court Press. Eric Frandsen and Jason Walker. 435-339-0321 if you want to chime in on the show today. We're streaming on 1069thefan.com, also on the 1069 The Fan mobile app. You can find past episodes of the show there. But we're also on 1069 FM and 1390 AM. So lots of different places to find us and interact and participate. Be a part of the show. Variety of different topics today. And it's transfer season in college basketball. It continues. When this is all said and done, we're probably going to have close to 2,000 or north of 2,000 players in the portal. And there's still, 20 days? 18 days?
Something like that. I saw somebody put out something earlier today where it's like we're, I think, 23 days in, and there was like 1,500 players in the portal, which I thought it was more than that at this point. But and he said there's 22 days left. So we've basically reached the halfway point, I think, of the portal window, apparently. So, yeah, a ways to go. A lot of new names could enter the portal. So we're still kind of in that stage where most of the news you hear at this point is guys entering the portal. There aren't a whole lot of commitments. There are people committing, and we will get to that because there's actually one Mountain West transfer who committed to a different Mountain West school.
Yeah.
But it's mostly guys entering the portal, and obviously there's some news of, hey, I'm staying. Actually, for instance, there was a guy who announced he was staying in the Mountain West. Nelly Jr. Joseph announced he's staying with New Mexico for another year.
Oh, I'm sure they love to hear that.
Yeah, he's a very good player for him. Very good role player. So, yeah, we'll go over some of that news.
Yeah, and you're still going to see players putting their names in the portal because the coaching landscape is not yet settled. We'll get into that a little bit as there's a very a developing hot rumor involving a coach in the state of Utah, the high-profile place. So more players could still say, this isn't the coach who recruited me here. I'm going to go test the waters to see something else. So there could still be more movement in the transfer portal because the coaching landscape isn't yet settled. But there's a text that came through earlier today from 2444, kind of on this topic, and we'll continue on this discussion.
You got to go with the first text, Eric.
The first text?
No, it's the same person. They sent two texts in. Did you not see that?
I only see the one text.
Really? 2444? I saw two of them. Am I seeing things? Or is it? I thought it was two texts like.
There's a space in there.
Okay, I thought they'd sent two different texts because of that space. Apparently, I can't see. I'm wearing glasses and I still can't see.
But we were talking about comparing if it's not really necessarily apples to oranges, but more like sour green apples to pink ladies.
That's what it was.
Apples.
You said pink lady, and I'd never heard of that brand. So I was like, what out-of-pocket nonsense is this, Eric?
And 2444, apparently listening on the podcast, said, I'm with Eric, hashtag Team Pink Lady.
I've always been more of a fan of just green apples. I don't know what brand or whatever, just maybe it's because we actually had an apple tree in my backyard growing up, and it was green apples. Granted, those ones were always too sour. I don't know if we ever actually got many great apples out of that, but always been preferential to green apples. Like that taste better.
Okay. I mean, that's what you're familiar with, probably. Yeah. Yeah, try the Pink Lady, though, sometime. Those are the real deal. But continuing, 2444 says, in all seriousness, Any updates on Ian Great or any other USU players returning? Lots of rumors floating around.
And at this point, that's what they are, and they're mostly centered around Ian because there's rumblings and cryptic social media posts about Ian Martinez. Potentially him returning. I mean, back when we had Ajay on the show last week, and he was super optimistic about Ian potentially coming back. But then, of course, Ian put his name in the portal. So I don't really know. The thing is that with both Ian and Great being international players, the job of recruiting them back is a little easier because NIL doesn't come into play as much or really at all in some facets. So the Aggies are just trying to send their pitch of, hey, come here, you will play high-level basketball, have a chance to be a pro. For Ian, it's like saying, hey, look, you went to Maryland. You went to University of Utah. They didn't appreciate you when you were a bench player. Here in Utah State, you found a home. You found a team that was willing to feature you, and you were a key part in winning a Mountain West championship, winning the first NCAA tournament, here at Utah State in 20-plus years. You go somewhere else, he's likely going to go, come off the bench again. Now, he'll probably play. I mean, he played at Maryland. He's a bench player. Here, he's a star.
Right.
So that's the pitch. I don't know if it'll hold, but there's a chance they retain both Ian and Great. I wouldn't say it's much better than a coin flip for either of them, but there's at least a chance for those guys, based on what I've heard. So,
yeah, that's the the debate every player needs to consider at an institution similar to Utah State. I had a great year, and do I parlay that into something bigger? Can I use that to find an even bigger stage with more opportunities? And that's kind of the allure of the transfer portal, is that opportunity exists. But for every Dalton Connect out there who went from northern Colorado to Tennessee,
he's going to be like a top 10 pick in the draft because of that move.
Yeah, and he was a great player at Northern Colorado, and that did translate and transcend and improve his overall stock. But for every one of those, there's dozens of players that just kind of disappear into nothingness because they don't even end up playing. Not only at Power 5 schools, sometimes they don't even play at Division I basketball.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's examples you can find even on Utah State of a guy who transferred up and didn't play. I mean, Nigel Burris, freshman of the year in the Big Sky. I was going to actually check on this. I don't know if he played as many minutes as he scored points last season. May have to double check that, but he didn't play a whole lot.
He did not play very much.
So yeah, there are guys who make the jump up and they do all right, and there are others who disappear on their rosters. I can think of a couple off top of my head right now, in either direction. And that was something where I was curious about, like, the exact number of, like, okay, how many people actually disappear? How many people do all right? And so I spent the last 2 days, Eric,
You've
crunching
done some
numbers.
serious crunching here on the numbers.
There's a lot of data entry is what this is. So I was putting it all in Excel so I could spit out some numbers. So to kind of explain the methodology here, I essentially went and found every college player who in the 2022-23 season, so it's not this past year, but it was the year before, I found every player who scored at least 450 points, just to kind of get an idea of, okay, here's the good players who produced at a fairly high level. It's not going to catch the entirety. For instance, Darius Brown actually didn't fall into this net, but we obviously knew he was a good player. And he transferred up because of what he did. But generally speaking, these are guys that, when I say 450 total points, that basically equivalates to 13 points per game, roughly speaking. Most of them obviously above that, but pretty much every single one of these players averaged 13 points a game. So I then went through that. It ended up being, I think, 161 players who reached that 450-point mark and also played this last season. A lot of those guys obviously graduated, went to the NBA, whatnot. So there's a bunch of those that I weeded out because I wanted to see, okay, how did they do this next season? Whether they stayed, whether they transferred. So it turns out it was almost half and half as far as who stayed and who went. 80 of those 161 stayed where they were at. 81 of them transferred. And so kind of the very short summary of this is that of all those players, the ones who stayed, basically nothing changed. Obviously the numbers that got spat out, there's some variance there, but essentially they played the same number of minutes roughly, scored the same number of points, started the same number of games, which is exactly what I expected out of that group. Nothing changed. A few of them, maybe they dropped off a cliff, but that's the kind of random variance you're going to see no matter what. So generally speaking, if you stay somewhere after a good year, you're going to have another good year.
Yeah.
Surprise of the century, Eric. The numbers that I actually cared about, I had these numbers for the guys who didn't transfer because I wanted to see something of a control there. Now, I did have the transfer split into two different categories. One is if they transferred to a non-power conference school, and another is they did transfer to a power conference school. Oh, I should add that another aspect of this is that I excluded, like when I talk about the 160 players, these are only guys who are at mid-major schools. That's actually kind of another thing with this. If they played at a Power 6 school in the 2022-23 season, I didn't include them in this calculation, even if they reached the 450-point mark.
This is basically the whole premise of if you're at a mid-major and you try to is there any truth to the matter, or what does it look like if you transfer up?
Yeah,
that's
so
in air quotes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at mid-major players who transferred or transferred up. So here's kind of the results, is that, so there's three kind of numbers that I went with here that I was tracking. One is the percentage of games that you start. So if you start 32 out of 32, 100%. You started every game, you're a full-time starter. If you start 31 out of 32, you're still starting 90+% of your games. I also looked at their minutes average, and then also their points per game. Kind of as a means of the minutes and starts was like okay, are you a key rotation player? And then the points was like, how big is your role? It's not a perfect methodology, but it gets the broad strokes. So, for mid-major players who transfer to a Power 6 school, slightly worse than 50% chance that you started roughly the same number of games. 49% of players who transferred either started the same number of games they did the previous, or like the percentage of games they started dropped by like 4%. So like barely anything. Like 1 or 2 games. Essentially nothing. So yeah, about half of them started about as much as they did. But it kind of drops off when you look at minutes in points. So like 35% of those players transferred to a Power 6 school. Basically, that 35% had essentially the same number of minutes. So there were 19% played more minutes, and then the 35% is how many didn't have their minutes per game drop by more than 3. Which, 3 that's not a huge drop. It's like, go from 34 minutes to 31. That's not a huge drop. But that's like a little over a third. Which a third of players who transferred to Power 6 schools had their minutes drop by more than 10 minutes per game.
Wow.
So a lot of guys seeing their minutes drop. And then more than half of those transferring to Power 6 schools saw their points per game drop by more than 5. A third had their points per game drop by more than 10.
Whew.
So the kind of broad conclusion is, if you're transferring to a Power 6 school, you got about a coin flip chance of starting or seeing the floor as many times as you saw with your old school, starting or just playing in general. But you got a pretty dang good chance of seeing a solid drop in your production and the minutes you play. Now, if you're transferring to a non-Power 5 or Power 6 school, the odds go slightly up, but the same trend is basically there, just not as bad as with the Power 6 schools. So that's kind of the results of the number crunching. I don't know if it really tells a whole lot. It's a 1-year sample size of 161 players. But I don't know, you surprised that the number is that high of players that actually pretty much start as many games?
Yeah, that does surprise me, that the number of starts is similar. I'm not surprised by the level of output, that it declines. Honestly thought it may have declined a little bit more than this seems to indicate. But I'm not totally surprised that their impact in the game is not at the same level as they were at mid-major school.
Yeah.
Where they are usually, the featured player, a star or an up-and-comer who's a significant part of the team's success, and then they move up, but there's already other players that are established or just more talented at that level as they have more resources to recruit those types of players, and then your role is diminished.
Yeah, I thought the numbers came out more favorable than I was expecting, because just going through, and so I saw every name, every school, typed in every one of these numbers, and the general impression I got was, hey, look, they're going to play, but obviously the level of production will drop. I mean, look at a guy like Stephen Ashworth. He's basically the poster child of these results, where he goes to a new school, started every game. Actually, funnily enough, I think he might have had the biggest jump in percentage of games started, but that was just the quirk of his role with Utah State.
Right, yeah.
So he goes to a new place, basically is, just as high in the rotation as he was at Utah State. But his production, it dropped. He was in the category of players who had their points per game drop by more than 5 points per game. So, new school, transferring up, still played, but wasn't a star. And so that's kind of the broad conclusion of, hey, there's a decent chance you'll play. Mind you, that decent chance, still only 50%. So coin flip that you'll basically have the same role, but very likely end up with a significant drop in production, and so that's kind of the question you ask yourself is, hey, you're going to play at a bigger school, but do you have ambitions beyond college? Because if you see a drop by 5 or 10 points per game, that's going to kill your pro chances.
Yeah, that's a significant decline.
Yeah. So there's very few players who will actually see a significant increase. Dalton Knecht is one of a couple of exceptions to that rule where they just increase. How many players actually had an increase? Yeah, of 57 players in this sample size who transferred to a Power 6 school, 4 had an increase in points per game. And only 9 had their points per game drop by less than 1.5. So 9 out of the 57 saw either a slight increase or, better than a slight decrease. It's if you're transferring up, you're going to drop off in production. So, that's the results. I am going to have an article I'm going to post it to Cache Valley Daily. That was another thing I was doing today. Once I finished this data entry, I was starting to write the article.
Yeah, this much work can't go left in vain for just a few moments on the radio.
That was the whole idea. I'll put it on the radio, put it in an article. So that will be up probably tomorrow. I might finish it tonight. But it'll have the full table that me and Eric have in front of us. So you'll be able to see all these numbers, and obviously just kind of an article surrounding it. So that'll be up soon. Just the results of me doing some very boring number. Going
down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, basically. Because I really wanted to see, because people have asked, what are the statistics behind, players transferring up? And I've always been well, I don't know. I've not seen anybody crunch the numbers. And I was well, why don't I do it? Can't be that hard. And the answer is it's actually not that hard. It's just a little boring. I don't know
time-consuming.
I don't know if I can really do this for football. I might, but it would require getting snap data, which it'd be harder for me to do the data entry for that one. I know where to get that kind of data. It's just the way I was able to get this basketball data, it was all compiled for me. I just had to click on a bunch of names and do some minor data entries. So, but I'd imagine football might play out similarly, although perhaps slightly worse. But that's just me kind of thinking about examples where I see a lot fewer guys moving up and having tons of success, and a lot of players, suffering a little bit as far as playing time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, those are the numbers. Feel free to text in if you're surprised by that or if it's exactly what you thought. Players who transfer up, they produce less on the whole.
Yeah, going to those major conferences.
Yeah. I'll be honest, though, I was almost surprised by, like, the transferring to another mid-major. Usually you've seen a lot of guys have a ton of success, but there are a lot of players who, like I said, it's only slightly better, which maybe I should have known that because we've seen examples of that. There were actually multiple examples in the Mountain West. Not just at Utah State. There was a guy at New Mexico, and I think even a guy at there's one somewhere else. I can't remember, but there's 2 or 3 examples in the Mountain West of someone who transferred in and disappeared after a really good season where they were at previously.
Yeah. No guarantees. I mean, fit is really important, right? How does your style fit with the coach and the players around you? Emotional fit, social fit, academic fit. I mean, there's a lot of factors here that that's why these players can't rush into making a decision. And sometimes we'll see players that look like they're heading down one way and then pivot and reverse course and say, you know what, it's probably better if I just stay where I'm at.
Yeah. And that's the thing you mentioned as far as fit, but like you're also starting from zero wherever you're going.
Yeah, to prove yourself all over again.
Yeah, and it's like obviously they will like you as a recruit, but it's as a recruit. They've not seen you practice, they've not seen you play, or like they've not seen you play like in front of them, like in their system. So the talent is there, but the talent has to fit, and it has to fit with the coach, and there's zero guarantee. If you're having success where you're at, yeah, it's clearly working. But, will it work somewhere else?
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah, it's tough. All right, if you want to continue to weigh in on that, love to hear your thoughts of the transfer portal, players on the move. Could there be more on the move in the state of Utah? We'll discuss some hot rumors going around about a coach in the state, if he's going to be on the move or not. 435-339-0321 if you want to chime in.
Imagine your wedding day. Elegant, simple, yet stunning, stress-free. It's your day. It's all about you. Whether you're looking for small and simple or have a grander idea, the Riverwoods Conference Center will accommodate your every need. Choose the inside ballroom elegance or outside along the natural decor of the beautiful Logan River. A Riverwoods event planner will work personally with you to make sure your event is exactly how you've envisioned it. The Riverwoods Conference Center, where your happily ever after begins. Google Riverwoods Conference Center or call 750-5151.
This is Ryan at My Mattress. My wife and I were laughing the other day because she read an article about things not to buy online. The first thing was prom dresses. Dresses advertised versus dresses delivered. Needless to say, what people thought they were getting is not what they got. It's much the same with mattresses. Almost always, buying a mattress online ends in buyers being let down. At My Mattress, we try to always exceed expectations. Lower prices than online, and better beds. Only at My Mattress.
Experiencing asthma, allergies, or hearing problems? Turn to Cache Valley Ear, Nose, and Throat, located in Providence and the Three Peaks Medical Plaza in North Logan. Cache Valley Ear, Nose, and Throat have decades of ear, nose, and throat experience for children and adults. Doctors Benyon, Blotter, and Robinette provide cutting-edge techniques ensuring you the highest quality of service and results. Go to CacheValleyENT.com. That's CacheValleyENT.com for appointments and details. Most insurance products, including SelectMed, are accepted. Cache Valley Ear, Nose, and Throat, helping you live the life you deserve.
Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent with Alpine Home Medical. I'd like to invite you to learn more about us. Since 1997, we've been Utah's premier one-stop shop for home medical equipment.
Hello, hello. Testing.
But you're still having an overdriven sound? Not as much.
Test. Test. Hello.
Your exclusive place to buy, sell, and trade all things Lego, and is now open Monday through Saturday. Join them for the re-grand opening event Saturday, April 13th, as we broadcast live from 1 to 4. Bricks and Minifigs specializes in buying, selling, and trading new and used Lego sets, bulk bricks, and minifigs. A party space is also available for the perfect Lego-themed party or event. Bricks and Minifigs is located next door to Little Caesars Pizza in Providence.
The Full Court Press on Sports Talk Radio, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan.
Welcome back to the Full Court Press. Eric Frandsen, Jason Walker.
Do I not sound like I'm sick anymore? Maybe.
Still got some funky stuff going on with your microphone.
If I change mics, does that help?
Maybe. That's slightly better, if anything.
Marginal. We'll roll with it.
You'll have to forgive me for how I sound the rest of the show.
We're talking about transfer portal. Interesting data. Jason's doing the crunching the numbers, trying to figure out if a player goes from a mid-major school like Utah State and goes up to a Power 6 conference school. How does that affect their numbers, their output, and their overall performance? And it's slightly down as far as point total, minutes played.
Yeah.
But chances to actually still start like you were before, about the same.
Yeah, your chance to see the floor is still pretty high. You're very likely to play. There's not a whole lot of guys that just disappeared. There are examples. But to be honest, some of the guys that ended up feeding into this, I think part of their, there are a few guys who play like 8 or 9 games, but I think some of that was injury. Granted, I don't think it impacts the numbers too much because it's mostly about minutes per game and percentage of games started. So I don't think those fringe cases impacted the numbers. But yeah, you're very likely to still see the floor. It's just that you're not going to have the same role. You're going to see some decrease in playing time. Not likely to be catastrophic. If you played like 32, 33 minutes, you're probably not going to drop below 25. But your points per game can really suffer. And I didn't include things like rebounds and assists because that was just way more data entry, but I'm sure that the numbers, they'd fill out in that same way.
Bear similar fruit.
Yeah. So
pink lady.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing. That's the very broad conclusion that you get from this is you transfer up, even to another mid-major school, which a lot of those are still kind of transferring up, like to a lower mid-major to a higher mid-major. You're likely to see the floor, but you're not going to be as productive in a lot of cases. There are plenty of cases where guys did just fine. I mean, we saw Great Osborne and Darius Brown do perfectly fine when they moved. But you see, other guys, they don't do nearly as well. Nigel Burris, on the same Utah State team, he struggled to play, as a sophomore. You have guys that move up from mid-major to Power 6. Nate Calmese, he's a guy I had my eye on because he got an offer from the Aggies last year as a transfer out of Lamar. He was freshman of the year. He played less than half of the games at Washington. And now he's in the portal again.
The player, and I'm trying to remember his name, out of UVU, who was kind of a big deal, ended up going to Cincinnati.
Is Aziz Bandago?
Yeah. Now he's in the portal again.
Again?
Yeah.
Didn't he go to Cal too, or did he go to Cincinnati over Cal?
I think he chose Cincinnati over Cal.
Okay. My goodness. Didn't realize that guy still had eligibility left. That was a guy who had NBA potential. He was being put on actual NBA draft boards. I think if I remember correctly, I think the last time he went in the portal, it was something along the lines of, I'm entering the portal and putting my name in for the NBA draft. And yeah, you're transferring so much, it just wrecks your career. Has a chance to do that. Well, yeah, he's gone from UVU to suddenly I confused him with somebody else. So I thought he was going to go to Texas Tech, but.
Well, is he heading to Cal? Maybe he is headed to Cal.
Maybe that's where
reunited
with. It's where a UVU coach went. That's kind of why I thought he was going to go to UVU. But yeah, he's just been around. Or maybe I'm conflating him. There was another UVU big who like went to Texas Tech and then went to, I think he ended up going to Cal, but reuniting. But yeah, it's just so many guys. Like I said, when we say you have a chance to play the same number of games, it's half. Half will start as many games as they did in their previous spot.
So more players could be on the move. Oh, actually, 9315. Before we get to that, saying what I got out of that transfer talk was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Better odds for going future if you stay at your school. Better odds for going future.
Just for
better odds for going pro or for your future.
Yeah,
maybe. But yeah, I think there is wisdom in that. Look, it's you go for a 50-50 chance that you might play as many minutes or start as many games, but more likelihood that your impact will decrease. Or do you stay where you are and continue to be a star, main fixture for the school that you're at?
Yeah, I think the main thing where you should have it like factor into whether or not you'd want to transfer, I think it's whether or not you feel like you have legitimate NBA aspirations. Because if you believe you're an NBA player, your best bet is to just stay where you're at. Because the NBA, they will find you, they will see your film, they'll take into account who you play, but they know who you are. They'll find you. If you're not as convinced, or maybe you feel like you might be a fringe NBA guy, or maybe you're likely going to end up in Europe, and granted, it can be hard for some of these guys to really honestly analyze whether or not they're an NBA or, maybe European, pro basketball player. Everyone thinks they're an NBA player, which that's probably a good mindset to have. But
yeah, you can't fault them for that.
But like, if you feel like you're more of a fringe NBA prospect, then, well, to be honest, you should go to that new school. Like, for me, Stephen Ashworth, he should have, you never regret for 1 second him going to Creighton. Yeah, having that giant drop, and he had like 6 fewer points per game, and went from a guy who was lighting up things from the 3-point line, leading a Mountain West team, to the tournament championship game, the conference tournament championship game, leading them to the NCAA tournament. Like, having that drop, being a star on Utah State to being just one of the starters on Creighton, yeah, that really hurts his NBA potential. But there wasn't a ton of that to begin with. So he gets to go play fantastic basketball, still play at a high level. It's not like he had a bad year. He averaged like 11 points per game, 4 or 5 assists. Still shot the ball really well from 3, and he was on a team that went to the Sweet 16, Elite 8. I forget exactly how far Creighton made it, but they made it pretty far.
Yeah, they had a run.
A lot farther than Utah State was ever going to make it.
Yep.
So, and then he still has a future in pro basketball, even if it's not the NBA. So that was a wise move for him, because he gets a lot more money, gets to play at a higher level. Even if he's not a star, he's playing at a higher level and still playing. Fantastic move for him. If you're an NBA guy, like if you're a great Osibor who actually is going to have scouts looking at him, you think he can afford to go somewhere and have his points per game drop by 5 and his rebounds per game drop by 3? He can't afford that.
Yeah, that's a significant drop.
Go be the 4th or 5th option on UConn. Yeah, that's not going to help.
By the way, Aziz Bandaego looks like he has decided to return to Cincinnati. His name was in the portal, but he has decided to come back. But here's a guy who was a star at UVU, big-time player, goes to Cincinnati and averaged 6.6 points, 7.4 rebounds. Which, I mean, the rebounds probably similar to what he did before, but he's offensive impact certainly way less.
He's the guy where his profile was more of a shot blocker. Like, how many blocks he averaged? Like, what was that like? 'Cause that's one thing he was really good at.
He averaged 1.7 blocks per game
this last year.
Yep.
Yeah. That's his offensive role seemed to plummet, but his thing has always kind of been he rebounds really well and he's a great shot blocker. So I imagine he was still doing both of those things, but maybe another year will give him a chance to be more be more of an impact on offense rather than the guy who catches 3 dump-off passes a game.
Yeah, let's see. Last year at UVU, he averaged 11.5 points per game, 10.5 rebounds per game.
He was a double-double guy, a 10 and 10 kind of guy.
2.9 blocks per game.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that high. I know he had like 2 or 3 blocks against Utah State when they actually played Bandang. I remember that's the first time I ran into him. He had several blocks against the Aggies in a game that the Aggies still won somewhat comfortably, but it was tricky.
Yeah. But speaking of Utah County.
Sticking in that part of the state?
Yes. So it seems like the coaching dominoes continue to fall. John Calipari decides to leave Kentucky. He's going to Arkansas. And as the rumor mill swirls about who Kentucky would like to find as their next head coach, it seems like just about everybody they're talking to so far is turning it down. They don't want it. And so they're starting to move further down the list. And right now, it appears the coach that's kind of moved his name up the list is Coach Pope down at BYU. Now, he played at Kentucky. He was part of the national title team in the mid-'90s. He was kind of having marginal success at BYU. There was a lot of concern about how he would transition into the Big 12. And look, they had a better than expected season in the Big 12. I know there's a lot of BYU haters, understandably so, but what you can't deny is that team performed better than a lot of people gave them preseason expectations to do. But does that still mean he's the coach for Kentucky? That seems a little bit of a stretch. Like, Kentucky's next guy is Mark Pope. Like, they were trying to get the Coach Drew out of Baylor. He turned it down. There were rumors that they were going to try to make a run at Hurley, and he gave him a big fat middle finger. Like, there's no way I'm going to Kentucky. And so, they're kind of scrambling to figure out who their next coach can be. It just seems like they're kind of moving further down the list than I would have expected if you're considering Mark Pope.
Yeah, they definitely think they're the best job in the country, and there's some evidence to back up. They're considered one of the blue bloods, and they have a lot of success and had a lot of success with Calipari, obviously. But I'll be honest, I don't think Mark Pope's a bad pick at all. Yeah, maybe he's not the first option on the list, but when your first option is just trying to get literally any coach that's there, because that's Kentucky's mindset.
Yeah, Nate Oates was another one who was on their list.
It was like when
Alabama.
It was like when USC football is like, we're going to hire the Steelers head coach. It's like, yeah, sure. You're going to have to move a little further down your wish list, guys.
Right.
So Kentucky's kind of going through that same process, but I mean, Mark Pope's resume is very solid. He was solid at UVU. Kind of turned that program into, they've been fairly consistent the last 4 or 5 years, and that began with Mark Pope turning them around. Had back-to-back 20-win seasons, 23 wins, 25 seasons. And then at BYU, that team has been ranked at some point 4 out of the 5 years he's been there, topping out at, in 3 separate seasons he's been ranked as high as 14. And he's been to the NCAA tournament twice. And that includes, being in the Big 12 this last year where, people were talking about how BYU is going to get their butt kicked in the Big 12. They're just going to fall flat on their face. They're in deep crap going into the Big 12. They're just going to get waterboarded and, thrown out with the trash. Went 23-11, beat Kansas at Kansas. Were ranked as high as 12. Only in the last week did they fall out of the last AP poll that came out. They finally fell out of the AP poll, barely. Going into the tournament, they were ranked like 21st, I think. So this was a good team, and Mark Pope did very well given the circumstance. Like, we talk about Jared Calhoun and justifying him. Like, his resume doesn't have all the sexy numbers that you want to see in the NCAA tournament numbers. Well, Mark Pope has all of that for the most part. Ranked team in NCAA tournament appearances. I don't know if they've won any of those games. They went to the NCAA tournament in 2020-21.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he has won a NCAA tournament game at BYU.
Yeah, I don't think so. Let me double check here, though. Yeah, they lost in the first round of that one as well. So, Yeah, like he's not led an elite BYU team, but he's had some really good BYU teams. So that'd be a perfectly fine hire. He's a guy who's can run a very solid offensive system, play solid enough defense, and you hand him the recruiting resources of a Kentucky, well, so long as he can use them well enough. He used BYU's recruiting resources well enough, and that can be a challenge at BYU. So he'll have all the recruiting resources he needs. Whether or not he'll have the same connections, because that can be tricky. Like, can you connect well with a very different kind of, recruiting at BYU is very different from, recruiting at Kentucky. Kentucky, you're, the top AAU teams, all the 5 stars, the guys who are expecting to go to the NBA. It's not the same at BYU. So can he transition to that? Maybe, but he's a good coach. And so if he's a good coach, then you got to take a chance on whether or not he can recruit the kind of guys Kentucky has to do.
Yeah, and I know we're overdue for timeout here. I'm not trying to say that he's not a good coach. It just seems like Kentucky's going pretty far down the list if Mark Pope's their guy.
Yeah, I can agree.
That is one of the bluest bloods of blue bloods you can find, the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah,
and so they should be able to command and try to go after anybody they want. It just seems like Mark Pope is kind of a stretch.
Yeah, I can agree with that, but I will say I don't think you're giving Mark Pope enough credit there. Where, he's a Kentucky alum. And where are these blue bloods supposed to get their coaches? Are they supposed to hire a pre-made Hall of Fame coach when they finally move on? You got to hire somebody.
Yeah.
Where'd Calipari come from?
Yeah, but we probably want somebody that has proven NCAA tournament success, somebody who can prove they can go deep into the tournament. And Pope has not proven that. He can do that.
He's not. But he has a lot of what you want to see. So,
all right, got to take a time out here in the Full Court Press. Love to hear from you as well. 435-339-0321. If he does move on, and if he does take that job, could that have a ripple effect affecting the Mountain West? Again, we continue to look at how that might have moves like that have a trickle-down effect, and we'll try to look at which schools, what areas could be affected by that. Discuss that next here on the Full Court Press.
Devotion to country, service to Utah. Brent Orrin Hatch had a front row seat, watching his father serve our state faithfully in the Senate. A constitutional conservative and lifelong Republican, Brent Orrin Hatch is a champion for the rule of law. He's running for Senate to stop this lawless president from destroying our country from within. Hatch will fight to secure the border once and for all and take on Mexican drug cartels to halt the flow of deadly fentanyl. Brent Orrin Hatch knows the national debt is just as big a threat to national security. Hatch won't rest until the budget's balanced and won't cave to the big spenders in both parties. Pro-life, deeply committed to religious liberty, rock-solid Utah conservative. Brent Orrin Hatch for Senate. Paid for by Conservative Outsider PAC, which is responsible for the content of this advertising. Not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. www.copac.us.
S.E. Needham Jewelers is where Utah gets engaged. We offer a large selection of personalized service and extraordinary benefits with our integrity price guarantee. At Match Quality, you'll find our prices to be as low or lower than any store in the state. We consistently beat any 50 to 70% off sales, internet pricing, or so-called wholesale deals. In fact, we even price our diamonds at internet pricing, so you'll get S.E. Needham quality at internet prices. Open Monday through Saturday 10 to 7, where Utah gets engaged. S.E. Needham Jewelers, middle of the block, at the sign of the clock.
It's that first kiss, that moment in time.
Engagement season is in full swing, and Jarek's Fine Jewelry has been helping hundreds of couples find the perfect ring. If you are getting engaged, you have to come browse our collections. Sometimes you may find the perfect ring in just a minute, or we can help you custom create your own design. Oh, and with Mother's Day almost here, talk to us about designing the perfect mother's ring.
Jarek's Fine Jewelry. Make it special, make it Jarek's.
Beezer Lock & Key specializes in securing your world with their expertise in locks, keys, and hardware. Every aspect of their services is meticulously tailored to ensure your safety. They offer a vast selection of hardware brands and access control options, along with custom master key systems. With Beezer Lock & Key, you have control of your facility's access 24/7. For 28 years, Beezer has provided top-notch security solutions that stand unmatched in the industry. Visit 4th North, 1st West in Logan, or go to beezerlock.com to discover more.
The Aggies Aggies, the Jazz, the high schools, the Full Court Press on Sports Talk Radio, 106.9 FM, 1390 AM. The Fan.
Welcome back to the Full Court Press. Eric Frandsen and Jason Walker. Reports, according to John Rothstein, are that Kentucky is showing interest in Mark Pope, head coach at BYU, who played there in the mid to late 90s.
Yeah, he was on the 1995-96 championship team for Kentucky, which was almost before I was born. Not quite, though.
Oh, gosh, it makes me feel old. But, if he does move and does make that move to Kentucky, if they settle on he's their guy, could that affect the Mountain West?
Yeah, I think there's two ways you could see a potentially impact in the Mountain West and in-state teams in particular. The first is there a knock-on effect where a Mountain West coach ends up leaving either for BYU or if BYU hires somebody else as a Mountain West coach and end up leaving? That's a much less likely scenario. There's maybe decent chance that BYU might look to one of the Mountain West coaches, but I don't think it's super likely they end up hiring one of them. They might end up looking somewhere else for that, but it's a possibility. It's something you would maybe keep an eye on and keep an ear out for.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if any current head coaches in the Mountain West are Latter-day Saints.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
You have to be LDS to have that spot?
Not necessarily. I mean, you have to.
It's obviously highly encouraged.
Right, highly, highly, highly encouraged. But you have to, as long as you're willing to live by the honor code.
Yeah, you have to live by the honor code and certain things like that. But if they're looking for an LDS coach, then zero chance. But as far as just based off of coaching prestige, maybe.
But it could certainly affect, as you said, things in state, whereas uncertainty with the coaching change could be some opportunity on the recruiting trail to snag somebody who may not be sure about where they want to go. If they were considering BYU, now they're not sure of the head coach situation, at least you do know what your situation is in Logan.
Well, I think in particular where it could impact recruiting is in transfers. Like when coaches leave, players often leave as well. Do a bunch of BYU players leave? And that's where you think maybe in-state, because, do they choose to go in-state? Utah State, even Weber State, SU, it depends. Would they want to move, but would they want to, stay inside the culture? I mean, Isaac Johnson talked about how when he left the state, it was culture shock, and it didn't go well for him.
That was not a good experience.
As far as his mental health, and he wanted to come back, desperately to the state of Utah. Could players from BYU end up transferring somewhere else in-state because of the coaching change?
Would they preserve that culture and a lot of that same connection, but and compete at a high, still being able to compete at a high level?
Yeah. Now I don't know if any of them would want to transfer. You might call it transferring down to the Mountain West, maybe, but it's a possibility. And so, at the very least, if Mark Pope leaves, you'd end up seeing several transfers. That would obviously shake things up, and maybe one or two of them stays in state.
9315. Pope was a legend at Kentucky where he played. They regard him really highly there. So it could happen, and I believe that it could, if he moves, impact the Mountain West, and maybe USU picks up some BYU player, WBY player. But we won't be like them claiming that the Y player can't play. But now he is the best because he could come to USU. Could see Johnson and Johnson at USU.
Yeah, I forget which player it was. I haven't really looked at BYU's roster.
Yeah, but they got some shooters, and Utah State could use some shooters.
Yeah, they have tons of shooters.
We got to take another time out here in the Full Court Press. Continue to talk about the potential for transfers and what's going on there, the latest details, and transfer in the Mountain West. That's kind of a significant player on the move. We'll discuss next on the Full Court Press.
Summer in Cache Valley is beautiful, and the Sportsman on Main Street has all your bike needs covered. Get your bike in now for service or a tune-up. We can usually get your service done in about 2 days. Be ready for the beautiful riding days ahead. If you need a new bike, we have kids to adult full suspension mountain bikes and e-bikes for around town or the mountains. From bikes to helmets to locks and clothing, come and see us at the Sportsman on Main Street in downtown Logan for all your biking needs.
Rely now on a York Affinity Premium Comfort System to keep your home cool and comfortable. The new Affinity systems are smarter and more connected and more efficient than ever before, and you can cut your energy costs by as much as 50%. Call Advanced Heating and Air Conditioning, your local York dealer, to schedule a free system evaluation. Advanced Heating and Air Conditioning showroom is west of DI and online at advancedheating-ac.com.
We're not comfortable until you are. Advanced Heating and Air.
This is Nate Lamson with Valley Office Systems, your home team when local matters. Valley Office Systems is your local provider for all things office, copiers, printers, furniture, and document management. Proudly serving Cache Valley since 2007. Visit valleyofficesystems.com.
Following the local teams, it's the Full Court Press with Eric Frandsen and Jason Walker.
Napa has AmSoil oil, the new AmSoil oil change kits for your Polaris or Can-Am side-by-side. Weather's getting better to get those things out and playing, so make sure you've got the right oil for it. They can help you at Napa Auto Parts, five different stores locally owned between Preston and Providence. So talking about transfers.
We've missed like several texts from 9 through. You missed one text twice.
Yeah.
He seems so upset.
He wants to make sure I read it, but yeah. Isaac Johnson, does he have a brother at BYU is what he's asking.
There was a guy named Spencer Johnson. I don't know if there's a relation. The odds of him coming to Utah State are precisely 0, mainly because he's run out of eligibility. Give you an idea of how long he's been in the college ranks. On senior night, the BYU had Spencer Johnson had his son with him. So
that's not abnormal at BYU.
Yeah, it's not abnormal for BYU. For Utah State, a lot of them are married, but BYU, they have children.
Yes.
Sometimes plural.
Yeah. So news in the Mountain West, a Mountain West to Mountain West transfer.
Yeah,
and look, this is I think this is a pretty good get. This is Boise State getting a transfer out of San Jose.
Yeah, Alvaro Cardenas. I may have said that slightly wrong. Guy who averaged, like 10 points, 5 assists, I think, last year. Got high praise from a lot of different coaches. Every single coach was very quick to praise Cardenas. He's in that pure point guard mold where he's not going to score a ton, but he shoots the ball really effectively, and he's a really good distributor. He's a guy that's capable of getting 10-plus assists, or at least close to it. And there's some people that are kind of poo-pooing this transfer, and there's others that are hyping it beyond, anything like saying, like, Cardenas is like one of the best point guards in the West. And it's like, he wasn't even the best point guard in the conference. You could argue he wasn't even like top 3 in the conference. In fact, I'd say he was not top 3 in the conference.
No.
You'd have to argue for him to be in the top 5. A lot of that has to do with fantastic point guard play in the Mountain West, though, because you're talking Isaiah Stevens, Darius Brown, Jalen House, Jared Lucas. Like, there's some really good point guards. Yeah, Donovan Dent. Some really good point guards. But the thing is, Boise State, they were conspicuously missing from the list of teams with really good point guards. Like, they're basically going to be replacing Max Rice with Cardenas. And to me, being perfectly honest, that's a
big upgrade. Totally agree.
Yeah, Boise State really suffered, I think, for their lack of great guard play. They had some of the best forwards in the conference, but Max Rice, Roddy Anderson, like, Rice was capable at the one night he went for like 38, but if he's not doing that or if he's not hitting 4 or 5 threes, there wasn't a whole lot he was contributing.
No.
And Roddy Anderson was struggling from the adjustment of playing in like the Big West to the Mountain West. And his efficiency wasn't very high. He wasn't distributing the ball very well. He had some real growing pains that his sophomore year there. So he could certainly improve, but you get a guy who's proven he can play in the Mountain West. That's good for Boise State, who's already returning 3 really good players in their front court.
Yeah, they're going to be a very solid team, a lot of experience. Odds-on should be the front runner coming into next season. A lot more to discuss next hour in the Full Court Press. Don't go away. 106.9 FM, 1390 AM, The Fan.
I'm Dan Patrick, and this is Above the Noise. The 2024 Masters Tournament set to begin today. Augusta National, a beautiful yet challenging course. The extra difficulty makes a win at the Masters one of the more difficult achievements in all of golf. That brings the tournament a substantial amount of coverage every year. But this year's tournament will attract even more attention. Earlier last week, it was reported Tiger Woods had been on the grounds practicing for the tournament. He had been training hard in order to compete in this 4-day golf challenge. The 15-time major hasn't played much since he re-injured his leg. But Tiger's return won't be just for show. If you've followed his career at all in the last 25 years, you know he's in it to win it. Woods still appears far from full strength, and he may never be back to his former self. But Tiger's won majors when he's been injured before, and this injury, prolonged absence, won't make him a favorite. But when you consider the history of this place and Tiger Woods, it's hard to say he doesn't have a chance. I'm Dan Patrick, and this is Above the Noise.